I wouldn't say Godel is better than Bloomberg yet, but we are 97% lower price. Too spooky, yes he did. But maybe Jesus is on his side. Maybe he gets a pardon. Maybe Shkreli calls up Trump. Donald. Yes, Martin. It's Martin. I know that. Okay, Donald. There's a guy in prison, Bill Wang. Chinese guy, huh? Yes. He's bad. I don't like him already. No, he's one of the good ones. I need you to put the pardon in. China. NVIDIA had good numbers. I mean, it's hard to argue. Yeah, Trump doesn't have Asian people around him. Like, ever. Vivek is as far as it gets. I'm a little less excited than I was about the DJT short. DJT might hang in there a little bit longer. I kind of want to give up on the short. Stick to SAVA. Marriage? I think marriage is a good idea. I look forward to getting married. My favorite long is probably still ADMA. I like VKTX. I like AbbVie and Astra, the big pharmas. But yeah, I like CHEGG too. It's remember, CHEGG is very speculative. I mean, this is not going to be easy. It's not easy money. I saw a post on X that basically kind of summed up my thesis already. So there are some people who are onto it. I'll be married soon, Anthony. Don't worry. Yeah, I like this Peri, P-E-R-I. I like, it's gone up a bunch, but I like HubSpot, Atlassian, Zoom. Yeah, VKTX is a long. People are overthinking that one. So is GPCR. I think my financial relationship with my future wife will be between us. I hope that's okay with you guys. You're assuming that the person I'm marrying isn't successful themselves. So if we're both independent, I think that's best because I don't like MicroStrategy now. If you're both independent, then all the little fights people have over money and power in a relationship to go away, which is dream come true. And also you can support each other. Yeah, look, Bill Wang didn't do... he shouldn't have done what he did, all right? But that does not mean, I don't know what to say. He shouldn't have done what he did. I still like ADMA. It really depends on the kind of investor you are. If you're the kind of investor that really likes long-term plays that are going to grow slowly but surely, it's still an exciting company. But, you know, it was really exciting at 16. How many people did Cassava hire? I thought they only hired one. They can hire whoever they want. It's not going to make their drug work. No, usually what happens at the end is after the failure, they'll spend like 6 months doing nothing and then reverse merge or something like that. And that'll be like a 95% dilutive thing. That's usually how these things end. Make fandom shares all day. I'll print them out all day. I'll be fan of the opera the way I'm printing these fandom shares. Call my office the mint, how we're printing these out. I prefer to call them synthetic, but if you want to call them phantom, I don't really mind because that's what they are. Well, basically, if you look at the CRO, okay, the research organization that's doing their clinical trials, CRO, contract research, these people have a big reputation, right? They do not want to lose that. Hurting your reputation for no reason is a big problem. So if I'm that CRO Premier, who I've worked with Premier before, I'm gonna go look at my network and see if pretty sure I find somebody there pretty senior. I'm gonna say, look, these guys are up to no good. Keep an eye out. If they misrepresent this data, you need to say something because this thing's, you know, a little dicey. SAVA insiders, I don't think know the result, no. If it were that easy, you know, any executive joining a company makes it a good company. If it were that easy, that'd be a trick. Yeah, Biogen and Cassava are both pretty bad. I'm not sure they upgraded that much. Yeah, I'd rather work at Kava than work at Cassava. I don't know if Bitcoin's gonna crash. Typically when things go parabolic up, they kind of chill out. They don't go right back parabolic down, typically. So I'd be careful shorting. But eventually, the best thing to do is when it goes down 10%, that's when you go in. Don't go as it's going up. It's just gonna hurt you. So you don't know when it's gonna stop. 1 hour, it hasn't happened before, to my knowledge. It's possible, but this is so unlikely. The board has some serious people. The board does not, you know, I don't think the board wants to Hopefully the board is doing some double checking. I don't trust Rick very much. There is some chance I'll have to be Martina. That's okay. I accepted that. Listen, I'm just reading papers about Cassava, all right? It's over $1 million now, but trying to get it to 5 or 10 million. We'll see. I mean, I've shorted stocks that have gone up. There's no doubt about that, but squeeze is kind of a weird term. I'm not even sure if there's a good definition of that. To be honest, I left my asthma inhaler at home, which caused a little bit of a problem. Let's read this. The incidence of ICC is steadily rising, associated with high mortality. Samples were collected to detect the expression of these two proteins in ICC tissues. The cells were cultured, and with plasmids that overexpress specific genes to investigate the impact of gene expression. Quantitative PCR and Western blot techniques were used to measure gene and protein expression levels. A wound healing assay was conducted to assess cell migration ability. The Transwell assay was used to assess cell invasion ability. Co-immunoprecipitation was used to identify binding relationship between the proteins. The effects of these proteins on lung metastasis of tumors were verified by constructing a metastatic model. We discovered the expressions of the proteins were upregulated in ICC and expressions positively correlated. The metastatic ability came with one of the proteins. Furthermore, the chaperone complex resulted in the abnormal degradation of filament A by activating autophagy. Okay, so autophagy activates or degrades filament A. Increased expression of filament A inhibits the migration and invasion of ICC cells. Overexpression of these two proteins promoted the lung metastasis ability of ICC cells. The chaperone complex promotes cell migration and invasion by regulating CASA-mediated degradation. I never heard of CASA, is it? Oh, I do know some institutions are shorting Cassava, yes. It's a fairly easy bet there. It's crowded, you know, that's why the returns aren't so great. Chaperone-assisted selective autophagy. Filament A is one of the prominent substrates of CASA. Should I do actual binding studies of the molecule and publish them when this is all over? Just be like, yeah, filament A does not. This drug does not even bind filament A. That would be kind of funny. The asthma thing was so bad, I was just like, I have to remember never to leave my inhaler at home. Yeah, you can go all the way to 2.5 puts, 99. Really, the fridge will always be better. The cytoskeleton has essential roles supporting cell structure and movement, cellular signaling, and regulation of gene transcription. What? There's a diverse range of structural proteins and associated binding proteins, which make up the key components that contribute to cellular mechanosensing, the sensing of and response to mechanical stress. The actin cytoskeleton is unique, as it is the only cytoskeletal component known to sense mechanical forces. Yeah, it's a nominal p-value after a failure. So like, if you're gonna drag the lake looking for like a really good subgroup, at least the p-value should be like 0.001 or something. It's like, oh look, this they did really, really well. Here it's like they did better, but it still failed, even on a nominal p-value. Which, you know, we all know after you spend your alpha, you cannot redo analysis and be like, oh well, you know, this is the number now. You know, there's not, you know, how that works. I was kind of trying. Regardless of all that, I think like we're all smart enough to know that N of one representation is pretty useless in a 900 patient study. They actually put out their discontinuation rate, dropout rate. It's very high. And like I never even modeled for that. Like it's they lose 20% of the patients. Now again, that's relatively normal, but like powers.
Yeah, more than 20% is definitely a red flag for dropout for attrition rate.
Nah, I mean, they're Alzheimer's. No, they're tough patients to deal with. I could see that 20% is, you know, a big point of this pitch is like, oh, everyone loves this drug and it does so well. It's like 20% of the patients are gone. You lose a whole bunch of power. There's a big difference between a 450 and 450 versus
what is that? So like 360 and 360, something in that range. So yeah, that's a big difference. Like that could be the difference between a p-value working and not working. But I really think like there is nothing to talk about. Like this, there is no chance. It's just statistically impossible. There's just I'm looking forward to the result because it's just so impossible for it to work. I've spent so much time on it, humoring all the kind of like possibilities, but it's as good as it's almost as good as any other short I've seen in this space. So you can't really fake data. Somebody's asking why won't they fake data? So you have a lot of parties at the table. So the first is that there's the CRO, Premier Research. They're a big company. They don't want anyone, making them.
They pay for?
Yeah, I don't want anyone making them look bad. And then you have the board of directors of Cassava, who don't really have a big axe to grind here, one way or another. Like, I would imagine if I was on the board of Cassava, I'd be looking to resign because I don't want to get sued. Now, the problem is the board has to know enough to say, I want to know that the data that we're looking at is legitimate, in case somebody does try to defraud it. I don't put it past Rick Barry, but I don't put it past a lot of the rest of the people in the company who are going to say, wait a second, I can't, I really can't abide by lying and cheating again, especially after a bunch of people went to jail. I think that Rick's wife, I think I mentioned, tried to kill him. So I think this is a guy that sort of has a lot of damage, and it's possible that like he's unstable enough that he would want to fake some data, but it really crosses into the line of extra criminal like behavior. Like it's a huge fraud at that point. It would be one of the biggest frauds in American history to do something like that. So you have the chief medical officer, the people at the statistics company, Pantera. I don't really trust them, but I think they have enough integrity to not do it. Chewy, I'm gonna mute you. Really don't think that anybody left has that axe to grind. I might send like a warning letter to like the CRO and Pantera and be like, look, you guys gotta really make sure that nobody tries to pull a fast one here and raise the alarm bells if they do. So the word alter it doesn't mean anything. So you can have a mutated protein, right?
Exactly.
A mutant is
No such a thing.
you have a different primary amino acid sequence.
Yeah, exactly.
You can have
Typically how we think about these things.
well, there's a lot of ways. You could have alternative splicing. You could have alternative post-translational modifications where there's glycosylation or something. You could have a number of different things. When you say altered, they did an isoelectric point, which is really not the way to look at proteins. Isoelectric points are really good for tiny, tiny molecules. They definitely make no sense for 2,500 amino acid molecules. They're just enormous, Yeah, calculating a isoelectric point is really used for things the size of like methane or something, not, this massive thing. And, you're trying to assign charges to, 3,000 amino acids. It's ridiculous. So the other thing to keep in mind is like most proteins, especially ones over, say, a couple hundred amino acids, they're very like active. They're almost lifelike if you watch them on molecular dynamics simulations. So the funniest point is the peptide region that they say it binds to is a solvent exposed, like distal, kind of like meaningless, like there's no reason to believe that it's that region binds anything. And like what they're claiming now is that it actually is the binding location for 3 different proteins. The nicotinic, nicotinic, TLR, and insulin.
Oh, insulin receptor.
Yes, but it's just filament A is a complicated and very interesting molecule, but the problem is that I don't think that 5 amino acid region of this 2,500 amino acid protein is really that, one, that relevant and important, and two, I don't think this small molecule is going to be this amazing PPI that is stopping these big interactions from happening. And then finally, even if it were the case, I'm not sure that the A beta 42 signaling through nicotinic, that exists, because that's not been able to be replicated. Nicotinics have been around for 15, maybe even 25 years. I own the first nicotinic ever made, mecamylamine. And it took many, many years for Pfizer to come out with Chantix, which is a very nice drug for smoking cessation. And people have tried to make hundreds of more nicotinics, and they've all failed. Or short old nicotinic companies too, because it turns out that these nicotine receptors we have, they don't do a whole lot. It's a very funny thing. You can block them completely, or you can activate them completely, and neither one does much, which is really humorous. And God knows drug companies have tried so hard. You have depression, which Targus have tried. You have Alzheimer's, which Abbott, Roche, and like 2 other companies tried. They failed. You have ADHD, which was tried very aggressively. We thought about almost every indication because we had mecamylamine, which was originally approved for resistant hypertension. It's a very weak antihypertensive. But we could have expanded that label. It's used sometimes off-label for autism, which makes no sense and doesn't work. It's just a lot of like little things, and none of them really work. All the psychiatry ones don't make any sense. We have nicotinic receptors in our brain, so there's this temptation to think that they're like really important. But it turns out like the nicotinic signaling we have vis-a-vis, like, think about like cannabinoids as well. Like, they're pretty modest. Cannabinoids do a little bit more than nicotinics, but not a whole lot. Like, you could shut down your cannabinoid receptors and it probably wouldn't be a great idea. You'd have some extra depression and stuff like that, and you change your weight a bit. But like, these aren't like massively important physiological receptors compared to some of the other ones like serotonin or stuff like that. They're all pretty subtle. So nicotinics have just been like a huge failure for everyone. And when they talk about the nicotinic being, like, the whole story they have is cimifelam stops filamin from binding to the nicotinic receptor. And so the whole, okay, that if you take that statement in isolation, what's really important is that there's some logical follow through there, that this is somehow physiologically relevant. And if you cannot connect the dots in between saying, well, nicotinics are, well, you know, I don't think they're saying it's a cure, to be fair. PPIs are generally much bigger. Never say never. Some of them are not that big. But if you...
255.
Is very small.
I mean, it's tiny.
Venetoclax.
It's like a building block. You know, you look at...
Oh, I agree. Yeah. This is more characterized as a building block. I know, totally right. But, you know, Venetoclax is fairly small too. So, okay, Venetoclax is a lot bigger than I thought.
It's bigger. It is pushing. I mean, it's...
Venetoclax looks...
right? So it breaks all the rules. You know, Lipinski, Mueg, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
No, Venetoclax is much bigger than I remember, actually. So, Venetoclax looks...
ECO2 is all huge, you know.
Yeah.
There's a few more.
Well,
another
one would be...
Fragment. It's something... I know you're familiar with Racetam or the, you know, Racetams. It looks like that. So there's something there, but I don't think it's working through the PPI necessarily. I mean, that's my honest opinion.
Well, they are saying it's a PPI, to be clear. So thalidomide, okay, maybe a better example is thalidomide, you know, which is a PPI as well.
Well.
So, you know, never say never is all I'm saying. But you do have to think about probabilities, and the probability that, first of all, you serendipitously discover a PPI is like close to zero. You know, it is very hard to design a PPI, and you don't just stumble upon it. You know, this is like when AbbVie did it with Venetoclax, they wrote like 12 papers on it because it was so amazing, the science. And this is like Lindsay Burns, not to disparage any individual person, but she's not even a chemist, you know. So, and neither is Dr. Wang. So to just like randomly create a PPI by accident is just the height of absurdity. It's not a covalent bonder, so you know there's no, you know, there's disassociation. If it even binds, even if it binds at all, there's no crystal structure. There's no explanation for the binding. When this is all said and done, I might just do the experiments myself just to have a laugh, because it's such a
just you know, email Wuxi or 𝐷𝗢𝗡, yeah, they will be happy to do it. I mean,
yeah.
Cost,
No,
you know,
I
10K, probably less, you know.
no, it's I want to do a professional job. I want a co-crystal. I want like if it even binds, and then yeah, it wouldn't cost too much. I was thinking the whole
50K.
Yeah, I was gonna say 50 to 100K. And the thing is, I've done all this stuff before because I was in the drug industry. Like this is all basic to do. None of this is that fancy. PPI is fancy.
Exactly.
You know, making a PPI is like, okay, we're gonna make a space shuttle. Like this is like serious business. Because you're talking about two protein interfaces that are gonna be highly high affinity. So stopping that is just with usually a micromolar binder. It's not gonna work. And you have to get it in the brain, which for most PPI is very challenging. So, you know, the amount of drugs that are FDA approved that are PPIs is like 3, maybe 5. Like there's 1,700 novel molecules approved. There's 6,400 total, but like the actual NMEs are like say 2,000. So the chances you've made a PPI by accident is like 0.1%. And then you have to believe a couple of other miracles. One is that, you know, half-life of 4 hours. How do you get constant, you know, blood levels? It's very difficult. And you have to get those constant blood levels in the brain. One thing that nobody talks about is they put out in their investigators brochure, I'm reminding myself now, that in animals, the brain was one of their lowest trafficked tissues that the drug trafficked to. So that's not good if you're making a Alzheimer's drug. You need it to get to the brain. And the lipophilicity here is fairly weak, so it's not going to partition to the brain in general, and it could be a efflux substrate or whatever. So like maybe 5% of the drug gets into the brain, which again is somewhat normal for a lot of these types of drugs. You want it to be a lot higher, but if you look at the stoichiometry, you have a huge problem with the dosing they're giving. I have a calculation there too, but you can't do an Alzheimer's drug that doesn't traffic extensively to the brain. You want a huge amount of it going to the brain. There's filament in every cell, is the other funny thing. Okay, so if it's an actual filament binder with physiological relevance, you should have side effects. And you'd actually see them, because filament's important in platelets. And if you're binding filament in platelets, you would have different side effects of, you know, blood-related side effects.